It's getting through. I can hear it in the mesh. That scraping. That slow, patient scraping. Elias Mull said, he said if you burn the sieve, it ends. But I can't reach it. It's been above me for I don't know how long. The fire won't. What is caught in a sieve is not gone. It is only held. Now, I want you to settle in. Pull whatever it is you pull over yourself at night a little closer. Not because what I am about to tell you will make you cold, though it might, but because a story like this one was always meant to be told in the dark, in the half place between wakefulness and whatever comes after. This is a Redacted Archives case file. This is the matter of Thomas Vance, antique restorer, formerly of Roanoke, Virginia. And it is the matter of a man named Elias Mull, who has been dead for 41 years, and who, depending on how you choose to understand the evidence, may not be entirely finished with the work he left behind. I am going to tell you this story slowly. That is not a warning. That is a promise. Thomas Vance was not a man who frightened easily. He spent 30 years handling the objects of the dead, the bureaus and secretary desks, the rocking chairs and hand-carved headboards, the things that people made and loved and left behind in attics and barns and smoke-darkened rooms. He had a particular fondness for joinery, for the way old craftsmen hid their intentions inside the wood. A secret drawer behind a false panel, a hollow space beneath a false floor. He liked finding those. He liked understanding how a maker's mind had worked. He was not by nature a man who lingered on what those objects might still carry. He will tell you that, too. Now, in the present tense. As in, he is not that man anymore. The estate of Elias Mull came to Thomas through a probate attorney named Gerald Pitts out of Floyd County, who sent a paper letter, which Thomas found charming, describing the property as a craftsman's workshop and associated dwelling, contents intact, requiring assessment and sensitive disposition. Sensitive disposition. Thomas thought that meant breakable things. He packed accordingly. The property sat at the end of a gravel road that stopped being a road about a mile before the map said it should. The hollow it occupied had a name, Sinking Creek, that locals used with a specific flatness in their voice that Thomas did not understand until later. It was the kind of name that described what the land did, not what it was called. What it did. The fog came down from the ridge before noon. Thomas noted that, wrote it in his small notebook. Fog settled early, unusual for the season. He would later circle that entry with a red pen and write 2 words beside it. It knows. He was not by nature a man who wrote things like that. The farmhouse was old, not charming old, working old. The kind of old that has been repaired so many times the repairs are themselves old. The porch boards were dense with age, dark and close-grained, as though the wood had spent decades pressing itself down, making itself harder to see. The attorney had left a key under a ceramic frog beside the front step. Thomas noted the frog had been placed facing outward, away from the door. He would later understand why, and the understanding would not comfort him. The first thing Thomas registered when he stepped inside was the smell. Cedar. Old cedar, dry and sweet. And beneath that, limestone. The cold, wet smell of rock that never quite dries. The smell of caves, of places underground for longer than anything living can remember. And beneath even that, something else. Something he would later describe as the smell of a room where the window has been left open to the wrong kind of air. The second thing was the sound, or the quality of the silence, which is different from silence. This house had the ordinary hush of old structure, the creak and settle, the tick of pipes, but underneath it, a hum, not mechanical, more like the sound of a large, empty space when there is wind outside and you cannot find where it is getting in. A resonance, as if the house itself were a vessel for something moving through it. Shush, shush. That was the wind in the eaves. That part was ordinary. Thomas told himself that and went to find the workshop. A ledger was beneath the central work table, in a flat drawer flush with the apron, opened by pressing a specific knot in the wood. Thomas found it the way he always found things, by knowing where craftsmen kept them. It was bound in brown leather, worn pale at the corners. The handwriting was small and even, not a young man's hand, but not a shaking one either. A hand that had made many precise things and brought that precision to writing. The first entry was dated April 1962. The last, March 1983. Thomas sat down on the work table stool and began to read. Elias Mull had not been, in his own estimation, a craftsman of furniture or implements. He had been a craftsman of containment. The early entries were written as explanation, not to anyone specific, Thomas thought, but to himself. The way people write when they are trying to fix a thing in place with words. Elias wrote about Sinking Creek, about the quality of the air in certain narrow hollows in the Blue Ridge, where the ridges above converged at an angle the old families called a draw. Not geographic, the sense of drawing something in, of concentrating it. He wrote, "My grandmother called it the heavy air. She said it carried things, not weather, not dust, things that had been let go of and had not yet found a new place to be. She said the old sieve-makers built their frames to help the air sort itself, to hold the heavy things so that the rest could pass through. The mesh does not destroy what it catches. It holds it until the burning." Thomas read that and sat with it. Until the burning. The entries moved into craft. Elias wrote about materials with the specificity of a man who had spent decades learning what worked. Wire was too rigid. Woven reed grew porous over time. Horsehair held well. The pale membrane material Thomas had noticed on some workshop frames, Elias referred to only as drawn material. Thomas chose, reading it, not to ask himself what it was drawn from. He wrote about the frame carvings, the border patterns Thomas had taken for knotwork. They were not knotwork. Elias called them binding lines, patterns that reinforced the function of the mesh. Thomas looked up at the nearest sieve and noticed for the first time that the vine patterns moved always inward, always spiraling toward the mesh, never away from it. He went back to reading. The entries from 1970 onward were different. The earlier voice was composed, a craftsman explaining his practice. The later entries were watchful, careful. Thomas recognized the quality. He had seen it in diaries from other estates. The quality of a man who has started to feel observed. In June of 1972, Elias wrote, "The oldest frames in the workshop are nearing capacity. I have let them go too long. I will carry them to the ridge before burning. This is the proper way." In October of that year, the guest room sieve filled faster than any I have made. There is a quality to what it holds that I cannot describe except to say that it is willful. Most of what the sieves collect is passive, residual. This is not passive. In January of 1975, I have moved my sleeping to the downstairs room. I do not like what I hear from the guest room at night. It is a sound like patience, like something learning the particular feel of the mesh above a sleeping man. I am going to burn the guest room frame in the spring. Thomas turned the page. The next entry was dated November 1979. He had not burned it. Between January 1975 and November 1979, there were no entries at all. 4.5 years of blank pages, pressed flat by the closed ledger for decades. Pages that held nothing, said nothing, and were in their blankness the most frightening thing Thomas had yet encountered in this house. The November 1979 entry read, "I cannot carry it now. My back will not allow it. The frame is too heavy for one man without damage to the mesh, and the mesh must not be damaged before burning. What is in the mesh must come out only in fire." 3 more entries followed, short. The last, March 1983, was 4 words. "Do not sleep there." Thomas closed the ledger. He sat among the 47 frames while the fog pressed against the windows and the wind moved through the hollow with its patient shush, shush in the eaves. He thought about the guest room, about the sieve above the bed, the black walnut frame, the dense horsehair mesh, unburned since at least 1975, possibly longer. He thought about the metallic air, about what he had half heard the night before, in the space between sleep and waking, and told himself was the house settling. Then he heard it again, from upstairs, a sound like patience, a sound like something learning the particular feel of a mesh, a soft, rhythmic scraping, not frantic, not panicked, the scraping of something that has been at a task for a very long time and has become, over those years, extraordinarily skilled at it. Thomas Vance did not run. He has been asked about this. He says he did not run because he needed to understand. That is the part of him that spent 30 years with the objects of the dead. He needed to see the thing before he could decide what to do about it. He went upstairs. The guest room door was closed. He had left it open. He stood in the hallway for a long moment and listened. The scraping had stopped when he came up the stairs. The fog outside had thickened, pressing at the window at the end of the hall, soft and white and dense as wool. He opened the door. The room was as he had left it. Bed, quilt, nightstand, water glass, window closed, floor unoccupied, and above the bed in its black walnut frame, the sieve. He had looked at it the night before and seen horsehair mesh, dark with age. He looked at it now with what he knew, and he saw it differently. The way you see something differently when you have been given the right word for it. The mesh was dark the way a filter goes dark, not from aging, not from dust, from accumulation. 40 years of the hollow's heavy air passing through that room, through that mesh, leaving behind whatever the Blue Ridge collected in its draws and its close, fog-heavy places. 40 years, and no burning, and what was caught in that mesh was not passive, was not residual, was willful, patient, learning. Thomas stood in the doorway and understood, with the kind of clarity that arrives quietly and stays, that he had slept beneath it, that he had closed his eyes in this room while what was caught in the mesh above him did what it had been doing for 40 years, testing, learning. He could not see anything in it. That is important to understand. There was nothing visible, no shape, no shadow that resolved into a face or a hand. The horror of the sieve above the bed of Elias Mull's guest room was not visible horror. It was the horror of almost, the horror of the corner of the eye. At the lowest point of the mesh, where the horsehair had been stretched thinnest by years and weight, there was a distortion, a slight, patient bow, as though something were pressing gently, steadily from the other side, learning still the particular feel of the mesh above a sleeping man. Thomas did not sleep in the house again. He drove down the gravel road in the dark, in the fog, until the pavement had streetlights on it. He sat in his car under a streetlight for a long time before he called Gerald Pitts. His written assessment recommended the workshop frames be examined by a specialist before any disposition. He recommended the guest room frame be handled last, with particular care regarding transport. The mesh must not be damaged before the proper method of disposition has been established, he wrote. He did not write what the proper method was. Gerald Pitts did not ask. The property remains in probate. The guest room door, as far as anyone knows, is still closed. Thomas Vance is fine. He would want you to know that. He lives in Roanoke and has returned to his work with a different kind of attention to what the objects of the dead might carry. He sleeps with a window open. He does not fully explain why. He has spent the last 18 months researching the folk practice of sieve-making in the southern Appalachians, the tradition Elias Mull was working within, older than Mull himself by several generations. He found a reference in an 1887 letter from a woman in Patrick County to her sister in Roanoke that read, "Mama's Sieve-Maker burned the frames last month, and the hollow has been easier since. She says it must be done every few years, or what is held will learn patience. And patience is the thing you cannot reason with." Thomas underlined that sentence. He thinks about the sieve above the bed in the guest room, unburned for 41 years now. The slight bow in the horsehair at the lowest point of the mesh, the steady, patient pressure of something that has become, over those decades, extraordinarily good at waiting. And he keeps his window open, and he does not sleep beneath anything he cannot see.
This has been a Redacted Archives case file. Go carefully. Keep your windows open. And if you ever find yourself in a hollow in the Blue Ridge, in the fog, in a room with an old frame on the wall, a frame of carved black walnut and dense dark mesh, do not lie down beneath it. Whatever is caught in a sieve is not gone. It is only held.